The title of my speech and my imagination coming to fruition would be the end of my introduction to this broadcast, which goes like this. Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, licensed presenters, the Core New Core, my patrons, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. And hence the name of my speech, Surviving and Thriving as a Pilates Instructor. Three things today. Number one is use email to make an offer. Number two is peace from the coordination of capacities. And number three is surviving as a Pilates instructor or student. So, in number one, for a long time now, I've encouraged you to become a presenter and be able to go over these 5 things and know how to add 2 and 2 by making an offer. And that offer would be to explain CT and MMP. And I'm hooked up now or reading from a source, the Moxley method. Be careful, don't get sucked in unless you're willing to wade out through the sales pitch to get to a next button. And maybe it was just me. Anyway, the Moxley method. A very streamlined, to me, state-of-the-art merchandising machine for information. And a good example of what you may want to have set up for yourself. Be that as it may, and more in general than just this whole be a speaker thing I've been learning about. What's already worked for me in the past is using PayPal to send an invoice, because all you need is an email address. So apart from a marketing machine kind of thing that I was referring to that Moxley has set up, just being able to use PayPal to send an invoice lets the person that gets the email decide how they want to pay. But they end up paying to you back through PayPal. Okay? So, in terms of monetizing your ability to make money as a Pilates instructor and presenter, this whole thing is about being a 10K speaker, meaning $10,000. And a lot of the messages and being there, and when asked to be able to say $10,000, how would you like to pay? And it could just be as easy to say, $10,000, I have your email, I'll send you the bill. And of course, whether they decide to pay it or not is up to them, but you've immediately made the offer of what you're willing to speak for and how to be paid for it. So number 2, the peace from coordination of capacities. Within the MMP point of view, if Pilates is an experience, a lot of that experience for me brings on a peacefulness within me. Because my capacities can be raging or out of balance or dictatorial or at odds with one another. And yet in doing Pilates, you seek to coordinate your capacities. And that to me is a peaceful experience. Number 3 is the title I'm imagining for my speech, Surviving as a Pilates Instructor or Student. Now I think that would be more interesting than a theoretical look at Pilates. Right? And it's amazing how much of my point of view of Pilates, when it comes to this book I bought about how to become a speaker, much of the information that the book asks for says you have to come up with, it's easy to come up with within the MMP POV and within an understanding of or an identification of, I should actually say knowledge of, core new tension. But the structure of, in your speech, identifying with your audience, your niche, who you're really speaking to, and to me that person is young and into Pilates and in pursuit of more, meaning not just enough to do it, but I need to know more about it, or I need to study it deeper, right? I need to teach, and perhaps in the midst of gone through and become a teacher, and yet still with an open mind to what there is to learn. My niche, my ideal student would be me earlier on, and speaking to me to then as though then for me is now for you, and that what I'm trying to do is help you come from where we shared in common to, she calls it a transformation, to where you want to get to, which to me would be a comprehension of CT and MMP, with an ability to take actionable stuff right out of this speech I'm making now, and actionable stuff. And gosh, I have too much information I'm trying to synthesize. And I almost left out. Hold on. Figures this right here at the bottom. We're not there at all. Though. This transformation, and where you are and where you want to be, and how I might help you get to where you want to be. And that in the dialogue it mentions the pursuit of pleasure and talks more about correcting things in pain, being in pain. And yet so much of, if you're really into Pilates, and you're able to explore it in your own body, on your own and for yourself, then a lot of it becomes, how do I make the most of my interest in learning more and getting better? There you go. And so in the getting better part, recognizing that core new tension is the way the body engages itself to move through space? It's a biomechanical thing. And this speech is meant to bring to you the knowledge of how the body engages itself to move through space by rotating at different axes that interact with one another. And then to offer knowledge about a point of view of Pilates. That is a theory motivated by the belief that Pilates has an essence of its own. A theory that Pilates has an essence of its own, and the theory is based on the evidence out of Joe's book. That's as tight as, that's where it comes from. So there's a lot of other ways to get information about Pilates. And a lot of other types of knowledge and information. What matters for me to you is that you recognize the transformation that goes on when you recognize biomechanics that no one else is aware of, or there's no evidence, there's no science yet for it. And MMP just being one point of view out of yours, mine, and everyone else's. My ideal client is, audience, you, is totally passionate about Pilates and has a connection to an experience in pursuing it or doing it and wanting a better handle on, especially if you're actually doing the mat, right? And to whatever extent you're removed from that, and therefore the effects of actually doing the mat are diluted and distorted, perhaps. My ideal client wants to know what's going on. They want to understand it. And in that, I'm here to help you make a transformation or achieve a point of view that you currently don't have. Perhaps share a point of view that you currently don't have. And that is one of biomechanics, that is a personal view of things about how the body works. And the other is a point of view of Pilates that's just one point of view out of millions. And so then the bulk of the information, after you've made this connection, and first of all, you start with your story to take you out of their judgment because you share your story, and then create a commonality between your experience and theirs, as though you're the third grader and your audience is the first grader. I love that metaphor. And all I'm here doing is sharing with you where I've come to that I think is a good place to be, or at least a good place to be aware of, as a point of view of Pilates, as an and the point of view comes from the theory, and the theory seeks to explain Pilates for what it is, as though there is something there to be what it is in and of itself. The takeaways. So I'm picking up that, so on these 5 things, making a speech is like you say something and then you tell a story. You say something and then tell a story. You say something and tell a story. When it comes to surviving, I think of a hilarious session I had with a Swiss banker, young, owned the bank, a family of banks kind of thing, but doing Pilates, back then it was the hip, new, the thing to do, and I'd worked with him a few times maybe, and where do you take a person about making the point about what Pilates is and why it is what it is. He shows up and I show up with the attitude of the police, and I arrest him, and I take him into the studio and give him as much space as a jail cell with a mat on the floor, which you wouldn't get if you were arrested, but a mat on the floor, and then leave him there. And he loved it all. It's the first time he ever heard the word thug. And my point to him was that, okay, here you are, unexpectedly, you're arrested, and this is all the room you got. And your mind is going crazy, and everything is unfamiliar. Well, you might turn to a mantra, or chant, or your breathing, but you also might return to or do the mat work, something that is familiar, and something that in the doing of it conditions you to be more present in the moment, to survive. See? So Pilates is about surviving. And you never know when your circumstances change, and you can rely on your ability to be doing Pilates, uniform eccentric loading, flowing through progressive patterns of movement, to be in the pursuit of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit as a state of being in the body, in the moment of the doing. So as a takeaway for that lesson, it was this is about surviving, and the reason to learn Pilates and to learn the mat is to be able to press yourself through exercises in a flow that gets you to complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing, that centers you in yourself like that as a human being, to then meet whatever comes up after the moment or in the moment. Takeaways: progressive patterns of movement, flexion, extension, side bending, and rotation. When it comes to going from one exercise to the next and picking what's next, from feedback, the most influential implementation they got right off the bat was having a sense of what movement pattern am I in and what movement pattern do I choose next. Knowing that there is a progressive pattern of going from flexion to extension, so controlling flexion first, and then opening up into controlling extension, all within the same plane, and then moving into controlling 90 degrees from that to take up 3D space. And then after the limitations of the space we're in within a 3D consideration, limited to a 3D consideration, a takeaway of having an understanding of how the body moves within flexion and extension and what lateral side bending is or lateral flexion, and that the ideal in pursuit, right? Pilates is a pursuit of ideal expression. So I actually have my second phone here. I started with 40 minutes and I'm halfway through, and I've really not done anything near enough on the carousel. I was imagining an audience and wanting them to see my movement from their left to right, like they write. And to me, that would be from my right to left. So when I go this way, it's a carousel because it's rotating counterclockwise when observed from outside of it. Even though for me, inside the carousel, it's moving from right to left. Why am I talking about carousel? Because to really take hold of the knowledge of CT and MMP requires multiple passes of the information to sort of have it become familiar and to give you an opportunity to make sense of things in your own time and as they go by. And each time it goes by, you're really providing more foundation, and more foundation to helping you get to the point where you recognize the foundation beneath this knowledge and you can stand up on top of it on your own and make use of it as you wish. That's the empowerment of it. If you're interested in surviving as a Pilates instructor, the MMP point of view is a theoretical point of view of Pilates that already people like you from around the world are familiar with and standing upon, meaning familiar with the foundation, familiar with the interpretation. So, foundation, yes, 1945, 55 years later, yours truly offering an explanation of Pilates based on what's in here. So, from Joe's book to here, from what Joe said to a theoretical interpretation of what Joe said. How can you not have some kind of an advantage in any conversation where even if you don't admit it, you're aware of the theoretical point of view? And if you know of another one, please let me know, because I'll be fascinated to know what it's based upon and what it makes of what it's based upon. MMP is based upon what Joe says in his book, these 5 things. And we got 15 minutes left to go through. So 3 things from Joe and 2 things from Michael Miller. And whoosh. Now if you want to use common names for both gentlemen, 3 things from Joe and 2 things from Mike. Okay? And whoosh. See, that's saying the same thing again, just a little bit differently, but still holding on to and perhaps clarifying better. So the 3 things from Joe, my camera froze. My camera froze. And when that happens, I don't try to reinstall, I continue to the next medium of broadcast. Which in this case would be